Today I'm on the World Tanks Sandbox test server for the New Balance. This is potentially a new version of the game we're going to have in the future, and I feel like kind of dumb because, well, I forgot this was actually going on. It's completely slipped my mind because I was focused on doing other things and didn't really remember about this, which is kind of unfortunate because the test server for this for some reason was only up for a week. I'm not sure, but in my mind I feel like something as big as this should have, I don't know, maybe a couple weeks at least, like at least 3 separate tests or something, just in order to get people acquainted with it, because it's such a big change to the game. I mean, even just looking where the premium tanks are located now, this makes a lot more sense, by the way, having them like this rather than the old way where they're interspersed just randomly throughout the tech tree. But the one thing I will say is it kind of points out a bit of a glaring problem with the French tree. They have so many tiered premiums that they can't even show them all in this section. And they have none at the lower tiers. Bit of a problem with the French tree right there, isn't it? Also, a couple of things I wanted to mention here quickly, just in regards to the tech trees. There are some vehicles getting removed from the tech trees. Just to go over the main ones, the T62A is no longer available in the Russian tree. The Jagdpanther 2 will be gone from the German tree. I think there was, oh yeah, the other vehicle was the VK3000 1D. And also the KV13 and the KV85 are going away in the Russian tree. I'm just doing these off the top of my head as they come to me. These are the high tier vehicles mainly, by the way. When it comes to the Americans, I can't think of, oh yes, that's right, there were I think 3 for the Americans as well. The T21, T71DA and the M4 Jumbo. Can't say about the Jumbo because I actually did really like that vehicle. For the French, they're actually losing 2 very high tier vehicles, the MX-30 Prototype and the MX-30B, which was a bit of a surprise considering, well, that's a mini branch for tier 9 and tier 10. I didn't expect them to just outright just wipe that from the game. Interesting choice, I'll say that much. For the English, they're losing the Churchill gun carriage and the Firefly, the tier 6 medium tank. For the Czechs, nothing happening. For the Chinese, nothing's happening. Oh no, so that was it. The last one is for the Chinese. I had a bit of a brain fart there for a second. The 113, the original tier 10 heavy tank for the Chinese, is gone. You can see it's no longer here. Now, on the live server, if I need to, I'm going to sell every single tier 10 that I own, just in order to buy those vehicles before they're removed. Because we've seen what has happened with this tank here in particular, as well as, well, this one and this one. How they're sold for an absolute fortune on the black market for like 22 million credits. And considering I have 2 of the 3 tier 10s unlocked, and like all of the other vehicles are lower than tier 10, I may as well just buy them now before they're removed and save myself potentially 20 million credits in the future. I just don't trust Wargaming to not do a black market with them and just sell them for an absolutely extortionate amount. So I'm going to have them in my garage. I'm never going to sell them before this happens, if it does go through. But in general, I do think Wargaming's sort of streamlining of the tech trees makes a lot of sense. I mean, you can see here what they've effectively done is tank destroyers and SPGs go towards the top. As you can see here for the Russians, tank destroyer lines and SPG line. Heavy tanks go in the very center, medium tanks after that, and light tanks at the bottom. It's a lot more intuitive way of organizing the tech tree. It's a lot better than it was before. But one thing you will probably have noticed as I was just glancing through the tech trees there is how essentially blank the lower tiers look in comparison to how they do at the moment. So the main thing with that is Wargaming has added in, I think, 3 new vehicles. I'm doing all this off the top of my head, by the way, I'm not reading off anything. They've added the BT-5 at tier 3 for the Russians to fill up the gap between tier 2 and tier 4. For the English, they've added in the Cavalier, the tier 5, effectively like, what's the best word to describe this here? I'm going to call it a prototype Cromwell. So it's an interesting looking little tank. It's, well, it looks like a Cromwell with side skirts and potentially a little bit shorter than a Cromwell as well. So it is an interesting looking vehicle, and I do believe it has less engine power as well. Yeah, it's got substantially less engine power, but it is an interesting looking little tank. And it's a new tier 5 medium, so tier 5 mediums are never a bad thing to have. And the last one, and this is probably the biggest one, is the T6 medium. T6 medium replacing the M3 Lee, finally eliminating effectively the roadblock to the American mediums and the American heavies, which I'm glad they've finally done because it took them long enough to do it. So it's nice to see that they have actually gone through and finally done that. Now, I will say one thing that's important is that if you look at the Russian tree as an example, if you go to tier 5, you can see the A20 here, and you might be thinking, where's T50? Where's the other vehicles, the lower tiers that you may have liked? If you go into the store and then go to, this is the old version of the store, I'm not sure why they have this version instead of the newer version which they introduced not too long ago, but you can see you can buy the old, like sort of, I guess, what's the term they're using for them? Collector's vehicles, I think they're called? Yeah, collector's vehicles. You can buy the old vehicles essentially just in the tech tree from here. Or well, not in the tech tree, sorry, in the store. And you just filter through to the vehicles you want to see, and you can see all these different vehicles are in here. If you go to the mediums, you can see that all of these different tanks, even if they're not in the tech tree anymore, are still available to get in some shape or form. Like there's the Panzer 3-4 as well, and the Panzer 3-4 is no longer in the tech tree as well. As far as I can see there, I don't see it. Yeah, it's gone. So I will say I do think the tech tree changes in general do make sense, and my assumption for why they would want to do this is this makes the most logical sense in my mind. I think what they want to do is accelerate the pace that people get up to the medium to high tiers, so that the player base is more concentrated in that area. Because I'm sure everybody's aware of this here, but playing tier 1 to tier 4, or maybe tier 1 to tier 3, almost like a completely different game from tier 5 and up. Tier 5 and up, completely different game from the lower tiers. So I think Wargaming's concept behind this is my assumption, they haven't said anything like this, but is just to get people to the higher tiers faster so they can get experiencing what the game's actually like. It's a fairly good solution in my opinion for like how to effectively sort this out. So yeah, I don't really have too much of a problem with this, especially considering the lower tiered vehicles will be available from the collector's shop. It's just the higher tiered vehicles that won't be. So if I go to tier 10, you can see that the Object 1, or not the Object 140, the TH2A is not in here, and neither is the MX-30B. So the higher tiered vehicles, tier 6 and up, you would need to buy before this patch comes around if you want to keep them, but the lower tiered vehicles you can get at any point after this patch comes out, if it does come out inside the next like month or two. So what was the next point I wanted to get to in relation to this? Oh yeah, there's one weird thing which they've done with the Russian tree, but none of the others. So you can see here that with all of these other trees, they have tier 1 up until like tier 3, and then maybe there's a branching off point. And also there's something with the American trees I'll get back to in a second. But for the Russians, for some reason, I don't know why on earth they did this, but from tier 1 to tier 3, there's 2 light tank branches. For some reason, they introduced a second light tank branch to lead the tank destroyers and SPGs. I can't think of a logical reason as to why they would have done this. Surely everything should just come off of the BT5 or the T28. I can't think of a reason why these tanks need to be in the tech tree anymore. It just seems like such a strange choice to make. I don't really know why they've done that. It seems kind of arbitrary, kind of random. But the thing I want to mention about the American tech tree, and I think this is a mistake, I don't think this is supposed to be like this, because I have looked through the entirety of the rest of the tech trees. Not a single case of this. Even the Germans no longer have the sort of side grid between the Tiger P and the Tiger 1. But for some reason, the T6 medium is a side grid to the M8 A1. So you unlock an equal tiered vehicle from a tier 4. You'll go up a tier. It's strange because you go from a light tank to a medium tank, then go to a tank destroyer instead of just going from a light tank to a tank destroyer. It seems so strange. I don't know why this would be a side grade rather than just an upgrade from the M3 Stuart. I think that would make a lot more sense. I have no idea why they've done it that way around. It seems so arbitrary and weird. But yeah, I think there are some mistakes with the tech trees that have been made, but I think those are fairly easily fixed for the most part. And the last one I'm just going to mention is, I don't know why the Cavalier comes off of the Matilda. It would make a lot more sense for it to come off of the Cruiser 4. Because the Matilda, like, I understand you're looking to make everything go through the middle branch, but in this case I don't think it makes sense to go from the Matilda to the Cavalier, because the Matilda is nothing like the Cavalier in any shape or form. Like, the only thing they share is the tank type. There's nothing else that's even close to being similar between those vehicles. So yeah, like, there are some interesting choices that have been made inside the tech trees, and you can see that pretty much the main thing is that the heavy tanks have been made the priority, like middle of the tech trees, and medium tanks just go below them, and it's effectively a much better way of laying things out and making things a lot more readable in terms of the tech trees to see where you're going to. I do think it's better. It's just that there are some wee issues that they have introduced with this, so yeah, I do like it for the most part. It's just a little bit strange to look at the moment. So next thing to talk about is the actual like game itself. Now they've updated the health points of all the vehicles at all the different tiers, from like the high tiers, especially down to the lower tiers, because the lower tiers now have substantially more health than they used to, which makes them a lot more survivable and makes the low tier gameplay a lot more playable than it once was. Just as an example, this thing here, this T28, renowned for being a one-shot kill for all 105mm guns in the game, now has 660 health instead of, I think it was 350 it had for years before that, and I think it was 320 with the stock turret. So if I just upgrade this thing to have the upgraded turret, how much health does it have now? 690. This tier 4 medium has pretty much the same health as a Churchill 1, that's a tier 5 heavy tank, on the live server. It's a pretty substantial buff in health that the low tier vehicles have gotten, and it should make the low tier vehicles a lot more playable than they are at the moment. Because like low tiers, like one of the big things that used to be a problem was, like as an example, tank destroyers. Tank destroyers had so little health, they just got one shot and just decimated in seconds. And when you look at the SU-100 in comparison to the SU-85, the SU-85 had 560 health, only 20 less than this thing has on the live server. Now, alpha damages have gone up on the test on this Sandbox server. Like I mean, as you can see here, 480 damage, but that's not enough to one-shot an SU-85 like it is on the live server. So 480 damage against a 560 damage health or 560 health tank will mean it'll survive on 80 health. It makes the tanks a bit more forgiving at the lower tiers. They're not going to get just wrecked and stomped as easily as they were before by the higher than average alpha damages of some vehicles at a tier higher. And let's just look at the... I'm just kind of curious now. I'm just kind of comparing the healths just for my own sort of curiosity. So the IS now has 1,560 health. Now I can tell you on the live server that has 1,230. So this thing on the test server has got more health than the IS-3 on the live server. So let's quickly take a look at the IS-3 here. IS-3, when I upgrade the turret, 1,860 health. That is pretty much as much health as a tier 9 on the live server. And then the T10, how much health do you have? Let's see, you have 2,250 with the upgraded turret, with the stock turret 2,150. So you can see just how much of a health difference there is between the vehicles, but you also do need to keep in mind the guns do have more alpha damage than they used to. It's just that the guns are not going to be able to kill the enemy tanks as fast. It's going to take an extra shot or two in order to finish off enemy vehicles whenever you're fighting against them. So I do think that's a good change for the long run of the game, but it's just one of those things where, like, I'm just kind of surprised at how quickly this patch is being tested. Like, it was only up for a week, and I don't know if they're going to do another test of this afterwards or what exactly their plan is. It seems kind of quick in my opinion, but it'll be interesting to see, like, if they do another test of this. Personally, I think they should, just in order to make sure that people, like, they should say, like, this is the final version of this here. Do you like it or do you not? And if they did that, I feel like people would all come onto it collectively and just be like, okay, this is not good, we like this, but we don't like that. Like, personally, I think the tech tree changes are good, but I am going to play some games now to see what I think of the actual gameplay changes themselves.